the forgotten foundations of sovereignty. The idea that all power originates from the people is not a new concept. It is as ancient as the founding of the United States. Yet over the centuries, this foundational principle has been obscured by layers of legal interpretation, political centralization, and cultural shifts. At the heart of this principle lies state citizenship, a concept that predates the federal government and establishes the relationship between individuals and their governing bodies. To reclaim the balance of power envisioned by the founders, it is essential to revisit the roots of American governance and understand the original role of states as independent estates held in trust for their citizens. The Virginia Declaration of Rights, adopted in 1776, serves as a cornerstone for this exploration. Its assertion that all power is vested in and consequently derived from the people was not merely a philosophical statement, but a legal foundation for the relationship between the governed and those who govern. This principle places the people at the top of the hierarchy, with magistrates, public officials, acting as trustees accountable to them. This trusteeship model is not just a relic of history, but a living framework that can guide us in addressing modern challenges of governance and accountability. Why state citizenship matters in modern governance. In today's political discourse, the term citizenship is often associated with the federal government. However, the concept of state citizenship, which predates federal citizenship, is the original and foundational relationship between individuals and their governments. The people of each state were the sovereigns who created their state governments as estates in trust. These governments, in turn, formed a union, the United States, through a carefully crafted trust agreement embodied in the U.S. Constitution. State citizenship is not merely a historical curiosity. It remains a vital mechanism for ensuring accountability and protecting the rights of individuals. By understanding the trusteeship role of state governments and their officials, we can better navigate the challenges of centralized federal authority and advocate for a governance model that serves the people rather than the state itself. The question is not just about preserving history, but about reclaiming a framework that empowers citizens to oversee and influence their government effectively. The people as the source of all power. We the people is not a slogan. It is the foundational premise of the United States. The power exercised by government, whether federal, state, or local, is not inherent to those institutions, but derived from the consent of the governed. This concept, articulated in the Declaration of Independence and reaffirmed in state constitutions, establishes a system where the people are the ultimate sovereigns. Government officials, or magistrates, are merely trustees of the authority delegated to them. However, this balance of power has been eroded over time. Centralized federal authority, judicial interpretations that favor national supremacy, and the diminishing role of state sovereignty have shifted the dynamic away from the people. This book seeks to reintroduce readers to the principles of trust law as they apply to governance, emphasizing that power flows from the people to their states, and finally to the federal government, not the other way around. The journey ahead will explore the historical and legal foundations of state citizenship, the fiduciary duties of magistrates, and the trust-based structure of the United States. By examining these concepts, we can uncover pathways to restore accountability, transparency, and the proper balance of power in modern governance. Above all, this book is a call to action for individuals to reclaim their role as sovereigns in a republic built on the principle that all power comes from the people. Part 1. The Foundation of Sovereignty. Chapter 1. The Origins of American Sovereignty. American sovereignty did not emerge in a vacuum. It is the culmination of philosophical, legal, and historical principles deeply rooted in the traditions of self-governance and natural rights. The United States, conceived as a union of sovereign states, derives its legitimacy and authority from a bedrock principle. All power originates from the people. This concept, articulated during the American Revolution and codified in foundational documents like the Virginia Declaration of Rights and the Declaration of Independence, informs the unique structure of American governance. To understand the essence of American sovereignty, one must explore its origins in both theory and practice. Sovereignty in the colonial context. Before the American Revolution, the colonies operated under a system of governance imposed by the British Crown. Sovereignty in this context resided in the monarchy and parliament, and the colonists were considered subjects without direct representation in the legislative process. However, the colonial experience fostered a sense of autonomy and self-reliance. The town meetings of New England, the Virginia House of Burgesses, and other colonial assemblies served as incubators for self-governance, laying the groundwork for the American concept of sovereignty. Colonists viewed themselves as entitled to the rights of Englishmen, including representation, property rights, and the rule of law. When these rights were increasingly violated through policies like the Stamp Act and the Townshend Acts, colonial leaders began to assert that true sovereignty resided not in the crown, but in the people themselves. This shift in perspective was revolutionary, challenging the established hierarchy of power and setting the stage for independence. The philosophical foundations of sovereignty. The philosophical roots of American sovereignty are found in the Enlightenment, particularly the writings of thinkers such as John Locke, Algernon Sidney, and Montesquieu. Locke's theory of natural rights, life, liberty, and property, resonated deeply with the American colonists. His assertion that legitimate government arises from the consent of the governed provided a framework for understanding sovereignty as a trust relationship between the people and their rulers. Sidney's contributions further emphasized the limits of governmental power and the importance of resisting tyranny. His works, alongside Locke's, were widely read and quoted by colonial leaders, shaping the intellectual foundation of the Revolution. Montesquieu's principle of the separation of powers, articulated in the spirit of the laws, influenced the structure of the American government, ensuring that sovereignty would be balanced among legislative, executive, and judicial branches. These ideas coalesced into a distinctly American interpretation of sovereignty, one that begins with the individual and extends outward to local and state governments, with the federal government deriving its authority from a compact among the states. This interpretation is evident in the language of the Declaration of Independence, which declares that governments are instituted to secure the rights of the people, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. The Virginia Declaration of Rights, adopted on June 12, 1776, the Virginia Declaration of Rights encapsulated the emerging American understanding of sovereignty. Drafted by George Mason, it proclaimed that all power is vested in and consequently derived from the people, and that magistrates are their trustees and servants, and at all times amenable to them. This declaration established the foundational principle that sovereignty originates with the people, who delegate authority to their government as a matter of trust. The Virginia Declaration of Rights served as a model for subsequent state constitutions and influenced the drafting of the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights. Its assertion of popular sovereignty was not merely theoretical, but carried profound implications for governance. It rejected the notion of inherited or absolute power, placing the responsibility of government squarely in the hands of the governed. State sovereignty and the Articles of Confederation. The first attempt to unify the states under a central government came with the Articles of Confederation, adopted in 1781. The Articles explicitly affirmed the sovereignty of each state, declaring that each state retains its sovereignty, freedom, and independence, and every power, jurisdiction, and right, which is not by this confederation expressly delegated to the United States in Congress assembled. This arrangement reflected the prevailing view that the states, as independent political entities, were the primary repositories of sovereignty. The federal government was understood as a creature of the states, created to handle matters of common concern such as defense and foreign affairs. While the Articles ultimately proved inadequate for managing the affairs of a growing nation, they underscored the foundational principle of state sovereignty and set the stage for the debates that would shape the U.S. Constitution. The transition to a federal system. The U.S. Constitution, adopted in 1787, marked a significant evolution in the understanding of sovereignty. While it created a stronger federal government, it did so within the framework of a trust relationship. The Constitution's preamble begins with, we the people, reaffirming the principle that all authority originates from the citizens. The powers of the federal government were enumerated and limited, with the 10th Amendment reserving all other powers to the states or the people. This balance of power between federal and state governments reflects the trust-based model of governance. The federal government acts as a trustee for the collective interests of the states, while the states serve as trustees for their citizens. This dual-layered structure was designed to prevent the concentration of power and to ensure that sovereignty remained rooted in the people. The origins of American sovereignty are deeply intertwined with the principles of natural rights, trust law, and state governance. From the colonial assemblies to the Virginia Declaration of Rights and the Articles of Confederation, the concept of sovereignty as a trust relationship between the people and their governments has been a defining feature of American political thought. By understanding these origins, we gain insight into the foundations of American governance and the enduring importance of state sovereignty as the cornerstone of the Republic.
1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55 and beyond. Growth emerges from silence, from nothingness, zero. A single step of breath, one echo of itself. One from this reflection, duality arises. Tension, creativity, and motion through the spiral of life, expanding. 5, harmony in complexity. 8, an ascent to the unknown. 13, higher truths unfolding. 21, limitless possibility. 34, unseen forces align. 55, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The unnamable is the eternally real. Naming is the origin of all particular things. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55 and beyond. Growth emerges from silence, from nothingness, zero. A single step of breath, one echo of itself. One from this reflection, duality arises. Tension, creativity, and motion through the spiral of life, expanding. 5, harmony in complexity. 8, an ascent to the unknown. 13, higher truths unfolding. 21, limitless possibility.